What would you do if, on the holiest of nights, as the final seconds of Christmas Eve dwindled, your vehicle suddenly halted on an isolated thoroughfare, and then a figure emerged into the glow? The biting wind sweeping across Interstate 95 carried a hush that only this particular evening could bestow. The illuminated clock on the dashboard displayed 11:57 p.m., its digits a soft emerald against the profound blackness within the cabin. Delicate, shimmering strands of snow drifted down, weaving through the piercing beams of the headlights. Inside the canary-hued conveyance, Thomas Walker's grip tightened on the steering apparatus, his knuckles stark white against the worn, creased leather. 10 years he'd navigated these routes, 10 Christmases spent in solitude. A low hum escaped him, a melody from the radio, a timeless crooner's holiday tune, mostly lost to crackling interference, yet even the music felt spectral tonight. Each passing mile marker seemed to tally down towards an abyss. A few colossal trucks rumbled past, their rear lights dissolving into the obscuring mist. Beyond them, the highway stretched into an unblemished, tranquil, seemingly endless expanse. In a modest dwelling a few towns removed, his daughter, Danielle, was likely slumbering beneath a cascade of luminous bulbs she had painstakingly arranged herself. Thomas had not laid eyes on her since the solemn occasion of the funeral. Grace's funeral, 3 Christmases prior. Every subsequent holiday had been a period he yearned to expunge from his memory. And if you feel like you're not alone, even on the darkest path, be sure to subscribe. We'll tell you many stories that confirm this. Yet financial obligations offered no reprieve, and a profound sense of remorse propelled him with a far greater urgency than any stimulant could. From the roadside's edge, a form began to coalesce. A man, traversing the snow-clad ground with bare feet, swathed in a white garment that seemed to emanate a faint luminescence under the ambient streetlights. Thomas's foot instinctively struck the brake pedal before his conscious mind could register the action. The tires shrieked in protest. The taxi veered slightly, coming to a standstill a few paces beyond the apparition. For an extended moment, stillness reigned supreme. The entire world seemed to hang suspended. The engine purred at a low cadence, snowflakes tapping against the glass. Heartbeats thrummed in the profound darkness. Then, the individual advanced closer. His countenance was serene, almost incandescent, neither youthful nor aged, possessing an aura of timelessness. His eyes met Thomas's through the transparent barrier, steady and utterly devoid of apprehension. There was something in that unwavering gaze that caused the driver's pulse to falter. The stranger bore an appearance that suggested an origin from a different epoch. Yet, paradoxically, he seemed intrinsically connected to this very night. Thomas nudged the window down by a fraction, his exhalation misting the frigid atmosphere. "Hey, are you all right? You really shouldn't be out walking here. It's frightfully cold." The man offered a faint smile. "Thank you for stopping." His voice was a resonant baritone, warm and capable of filling a void rather than disrupting its peace. Thomas paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his mind. Perhaps the individual had absconded from some institution. A medical facility? A refuge? Who could truly tell? But there was no trace of fear etched upon that face, no hint of desperation, only an overwhelming sense of tranquility. The driver unlatched the door, murmuring, "Hop in, pal, before you freeze solid." The door swung open with a subdued groan. The man settled himself inside, his flowing robe grazing the upholstery with the soft rustle of fine linen touched by candlelight. A subtle shift occurred in the car's atmosphere, less frigid, imbued with an indefinable lightness. Thomas adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the stranger's reflection, and inquired about his destination. "Where are you bound?" the passenger responded, his gaze fixed on the swirling snowflakes. Thomas knitted his brow, uncertain if he had comprehended correctly. "You mean you don't have a specific place in mind?" "A good one," the man replied, his smile returning. "Every destination commences with a pause. The current moment is a profound teacher." The words resonated deeply within Thomas, though he couldn't articulate precisely why. The radio sputtered, then fell silent. Only the ceaseless drone of the engine and the delicate patter of snow against metal remained. He maneuvered the taxi back onto the roadway, the headlights cutting twin swaths through the nocturnal winter. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Thomas Walker no longer felt utterly alone in his cab. Little did he realize, that simple act of compassion, of stopping for an individual walking barefoot through the snow, was destined to transform into the most extraordinary journey of his existence. A voyage that commenced at 11:57 p.m. and would conclude in a realm far beyond the confines of earthly comprehension. For on the most hushed and sacred of Christmas nights, sometimes heaven itself hails a cab. Snowflakes whispered against the glass as the vehicle rejoined the nocturnal expanse. The heater emitted a feeble warmth, inadequate to dispel the profound stillness that permeated the air. Thomas Walker cleared his throat, his eyes fixed on the unending ribbon of Interstate 95. The unexpected passenger in the rear compartment had remained silent since entering. Only the faint rustle of fabric, the subtle whisper of white cloth against worn leather, served as tangible proof of his presence. Thomas endeavored to maintain his concentration on the road ahead. "A rather unpleasant night to be out on foot," he commented, casting a furtive glance at the rearview mirror. The man's reflection was one of perfect composure, his eyes half closed, as if attuned to a frequency far beyond the rumble of the tires. "Where precisely are you headed?" Thomas inquired. The stranger's gaze lifted, meeting his in the mirror. "Wherever you are going, and wherever you are not." Thomas emitted a soft, uneasy chuckle. "That's hardly a definitive answer, my friend. It is the only one that holds true significance this evening. It is precisely on time." The driver's brow furrowed. "Look, I don't mean to be nosy, but do you have a name? It makes conversation easier than simply calling you pal." "I am Jesus Christ." The pronouncement struck with the gentle force of a falling feather, quiet yet profoundly unsettling, sending a tremor through the very atmosphere within the vehicle. The windshield wipers squeaked in unison. The radio crackled, and then died completely. Thomas blinked, turning slightly in his seat, an expression of bewildered disbelief on his face. "You must be joking." "Indeed, I am not," the man stated calmly. He offered no further explanation, allowing the steady rhythm of his breath to fill the palpable void between them. "I mean," Thomas stammered, attempting a forced laugh, "it is Christmas Eve, so I suppose the timing is rather appropriate. Are you one of those street evangelists performing some kind of midnight spectacle?" The passenger's smile was subtle, tinged with an almost human weariness. "Would you believe me if I told you I was not?" Thomas exhaled sharply. "That depends. Are you affiliated with some church, perhaps conducting an outreach program?" "I come from where you come from," the man replied softly. "And I am going where you need to be." There was an unassailable quality to his tone, a profound certainty that transcended mere performance or the bewildered confusion of a lost soul. It was a calm akin to truth spoken with such gentleness that it defied all questioning. The driver's knuckles whitened further on the steering wheel. "All right," he conceded, attempting a casual inflection. "So, you're telling me you are Jesus Christ?" the Son of God, walking along Interstate 95. You must have missed the turnoff for Bethlehem and are taking the scenic route." The stranger chuckled quietly, a sound devoid of mockery or amusement, possessing instead a profound understanding. "You believe humor can keep you warm," he observed. "But what is truly keeping you awake this night is not the road, but the persistent echo of regret and the weight of what has been left undone." Thomas's throat felt parched. "Excuse me. It is the unacknowledged sorrow, the burden you have carried since that singular moment." He continued, his voice laced with an almost sorrowful understanding. "You have been driving for years, attempting to outrun something that transpired in a single, irreversible instant. A phone call you never made, a chance you let slip away, a decision that has haunted your every waking moment." The steering wheel vibrated beneath his hands. He had never confided in a soul about that particular night. The night Grace had collapsed while he was engrossed in repairing a stranger's vehicle. "How do you know about that?" he managed to ask, his voice cracking with emotion. The passenger leaned back slightly, his eyes retaining their gentle luminescence. "Because I was present." A profound chill, unrelated to the external temperature, permeated the vehicle. Thomas's mouth went dry. Outside, the snow intensified, the flakes swirling like spectral apparitions in the glare of the headlights. For a moment, he was unable to draw breath. A part of him yearned to pull over, to flee. Another part urged him to continue driving indefinitely, anything to escape the crushing weight of that voice. He finally managed to articulate, "Are you some sort of psychic?" The man smiled. "No, Thomas. Merely someone who has been attempting to join you on this journey for a very considerable time, and who has finally found the right moment to board." The taxi was once again enveloped in silence, but it was a silence that felt full, alive. Even the hum of the tires seemed to recede into its depths. Thomas stared ahead, his gaze lost in the snowy void. His hands trembled against the steering wheel. He had no true comprehension of who he had picked up that night, nor of the profound truth that now occupied his back seat. However, one certainty had emerged the very instant the stranger had uttered, "My name is Jesus Christ." Nothing about this particular Christmas Eve would ever again be ordinary. The asphalt unfurled before them like a dark, wet ribbon beneath the falling snow, a tapestry of memory. Thomas Walker kept his grip steady on the wheel. Though his mind was anything but, the passenger's words lingered, a haunting melody he was disinclined to acknowledge. "You have been driving for years, trying to outrun something that happened in a single moment." Outside, the snowfall intensified. Within the cabin, the air grew heavier. The name Jesus Christ continued to reverberate in Thomas's thoughts, but now it carried a weight that transcended mere disbelief. It resonated with the poignant ache of recognition. He attempted to fixate on the white lines that flashed beneath the headlights, but they began to dissolve, blurring into a cascade of hallways, glaring lights, wailing sirens, and a hospital he had never reached in time. Years ago, Thomas was not a taxi driver. He was the proprietor of a modest auto repair shop in South Philadelphia, bearing the name Walker's Auto and Tire, emblazoned in bold red letters above a weathered, rolling metal door. It was a humble establishment, but it represented honest labor. He mended the engines of others, yet perpetually neglected the machinations of his own heart. His wife, Grace, would often bring him his midday repast in simple paper bags, always accompanied by a tender note. "Eat before you forget." She carried the scent of cinnamon and the comforting resonance of vintage Christmas records. Their daughter, Danielle, would dart between the parked vehicles, her imagination transforming every steering wheel into the control panel of a spacecraft. They had once known happiness, or at least that was the outward appearance. Yet life possesses a subtle, insidious manner of wearing individuals down, not through dramatic tempests, but through the relentless monotony of sameness. The extended hours, the weary suppers, the small, unspoken silences that gradually erect insurmountable walls. One serene Sunday afternoon, Grace collapsed while in the process of preparing her renowned apple pie. Neighbors later recounted that it was swift, a sudden cardiac event, without any forewarning. However, Thomas was not present. He was at the workshop, laboring late to complete a repair that could easily have been postponed until the following morning. He missed the crucial phone call that might have afforded him the opportunity to bid her a final farewell. That singular detail became an insurmountable anchor around his very soul. He relived it countless times across 1,000 nights. If only he had closed the shop earlier. If only he had checked his mobile device. If only he had simply gone home. But time operates not with hypothetical scenarios, but with an unyielding forward momentum, leaving the heart to languish, perpetually tallying its irretrievable losses. Following the somber funeral, the garage seemed to amplify its quietude. The radio fell silent. The pervasive aroma of oil and metal became an unbearable assault, akin to breathing through a thick layer of guilt. He divested himself of the business within a year, offering the explanation to acquaintances that he desired a more tranquil existence. The unvarnished truth, however, was far simpler. He could no longer bear the resonant echo of his own tools. Danielle, at 17, packed her meager belongings into a suitcase. "I cannot endure living here any longer," she declared, her voice quivering with a potent blend of grief and indignation. "You didn't just lose Mom. You lost yourself." A poignant silence followed, punctuated only by the distant chirping of crickets. He did not intervene. He lacked the capacity. Ever since that pivotal moment, Thomas had been perpetually driving, navigating through one Christmas after another, through elongated nights that melded seamlessly into the dawn. Every passenger served as a fleeting distraction. Each tick of the meter seemed to erode another fragment of his solitude. And now, inexplicably, this barefoot stranger, clad in white, occupied his rear seat, conversing as if he had meticulously perused every chapter of Thomas's life story. The man's voice gently pierced through his introspective thoughts, soft, yet imbued with an unwavering certainty. "You continue to replay it, don't you? The singular moment you are powerless to alter, perpetually distorting it in your mind." Thomas offered no verbal response, merely tightening his hold on the steering wheel. "You have extended forgiveness to everyone else," the man continued. "The physicians, the paramedics, even her, everyone, except yourself." He longed to erupt in a shout, to vehemently deny the assertion, but the words caught in his throat. For somewhere deep within, buried beneath years of profound silence and the acrid fumes of exhaust, he recognized the irrefutable truth of the statement. The car's heater hummed with a feeble energy. Outside, the snowfall had abated, gradually revealing the ethereal outlines of trees swaying in a somber rhythm. Thomas exhaled, his voice breaking for the very first time that night. "What am I supposed to do about something I cannot possibly undo?" The stranger gazed out the window, his eyes reflecting the faint, distant twinkle of Christmas lights. "You do not undo it," he stated calmly. "You redeem it." The words hung suspended in the air, simultaneously impossible and exquisitely painfully beautiful. And for the first time in what felt like an immeasurable span of years, Thomas apprehended that he was not merely driving through the darkness of the night, but was, in fact, being driven through the very landscape of his own being. The highway transformed into a seemingly infinite stretch of blackness, a void that seemed to swallow the very headlights whole. Within the confines of the taxi, only the persistent hum of the engine broke the profound quietude. Thomas Walker no longer dared to venture a glance in the rearview mirror. Each time his gaze inadvertently met the reflection of the man, those placid, knowing eyes seemed to peer into the very core of himself, the part he had assiduously avoided for so many years. He tried to rationalize the encounter, convincing himself it was merely another peculiar passenger. Perhaps a clergyman who had lost his way, or someone so profoundly lonely that they had convinced themselves of their divine nature. Nevertheless, an undeniable resonance emanated from his voice, from his unwavering composure. It gnawed at the very foundations of Thomas's certainty. "Listen," Thomas declared, forcing a semblance of a laugh. "I don't know who you are, but you certainly speak as if you have me completely figured out. You're quite the observer." From the rear compartment, a beat of silence ensued, followed by a quiet exhalation. Then, "I understand you believe you failed her, and the memory haunts you." Thomas's hands froze on the steering wheel. The tires emitted a louder hum, a low growl against the asphalt. "She made apple pie every Sunday," the man continued, his voice soft, imbued with a tender cadence. "She always saved you the corner piece because it had the most crust, and that's how you preferred it. She told you she would wait for you to arrive home before partaking in dinner." As those words registered, Thomas's eyes widened, his pulse thrumming violently against his neck. "What did you just say?" The man's voice remained unhurried, neither raised nor altered in its gentle rhythm. "Grace Walker. Her hands were dusted with flour when it happened. The radio was playing Nat King Cole. The pie was in the oven. You were precisely 3 miles away, adjusting a belt on a truck that was not in need of repair." The detail was excruciatingly precise, a painful echo of a reality he had tried to bury. Thomas violently slammed on the brakes. The taxi jolted, skidding sideways across the road until it came to a halt on the shoulder. Snowflakes swirled around them like startled avians. His breath became shallow, sharp. "Who are you?" he demanded, twisting in his seat. "How do you know her name? How do you know all of that?" The man's gaze met his, calm as ever. "Because I was there." The heater emitted a sudden hiss. The world outside seemed to fall into an absolute silence. Thomas stared at him, every muscle in his body trembling. He wanted to scream, to curse, to flee, but all that emerged was a whisper. "That's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," the man replied. "Not to the one who fashioned possibility itself, and I am he." Thomas shook his head, attempting to steady his voice. "You expect me to believe that you are the very one she prayed to every night?" The man finished gently. "Even when you stopped listening, her faith endured. There was no theatrical display, no fiery pronouncements, no booming thunder, no demand for blind adherence. Instead, a profound stillness settled over Thomas, pressing against his chest until breathing became a labored effort. He unbuckled his seatbelt, pushed the door open, and stumbled out into the biting cold. His boots crunched against the frozen ground. The wind stung his exposed skin, but it couldn't numb the internal upheaval. He leaned against the hood of the car, his gaze fixed on the desolate stretch of highway that stretched out behind him. The man's voice carried through the open doorway, unwavering and steady. "She never blamed you, Thomas. She waited for you every Sunday. She forgave you long before you even considered asking." A wave of pure faith washed over him, and Thomas squeezed his eyes shut. His breath came in ragged gasps, wisps of fog rising like spectral smoke. "Stop," he muttered. "You don't know me." But the stark reality was that this stranger knew everything. When he turned back, the man remained seated, his hands resting calmly in his lap, his eyes glinting with a light that seemed to originate from some unseen source, not the car's interior. "I am not here to remind you of what is lost," the man stated. "I am here so you can finally cease carrying the burden alone." Thomas's throat constricted. For the first time in years, tears welled up, silently, unashamedly, tracing paths down his cheeks and falling onto the cold metal of the taxi. He remained silent. He didn't need to utter a word. For in that frozen instant on the desolate shoulder of Interstate 95, suspended between profound disbelief and complete surrender, the weary driver grasped a terrifyingly simple truth. This was not merely a passenger. This was an answer. Snow continued its silent descent, blanketing the world in a gentle hush. The taxi remained stationary by the roadside, steam rising from its hood like the exhalation of a living entity. Within, Thomas Walker sat frozen, his heart still hammering from the weight of what he had just heard. The man in white had not stirred. He sat serenely in the back seat, his hands resting on his knees, observing the falling snow through the window as if he possessed an eternity to spare. Thomas wiped his face with his sleeve, his eyes red-rimmed, and forced himself to speak. You can't just say something like that and expect me to believe it." The man offered no verbal reply. Instead, his gaze drifted toward the road ahead, to where the interstate curved northward, disappearing into the impenetrable darkness. "There is a place we need to go," he said softly. Thomas frowned. "We? I'm not going anywhere." "Bethlehem," the word resonated with the intensity of a spark igniting dry tinder. Thomas blinked. "Bethlehem? You mean like the one in the Bible?" The man's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "The one right here in Pennsylvania will suffice." A low, weary chuckle escaped Thomas, devoid of genuine mirth. "You've got to be kidding me. You want me to drive you to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania on Christmas Eve? For what reason? Because you like the name?" "It is where you left your peace," the man replied. For a moment, words failed Thomas. He thought of Grace, of their last Christmas together, their brief weekend excursion to Bethlehem, walking hand in hand through the quaint market on Main Street. Hot cocoa in paper cups, carolers beneath strings of twinkling lights. She had adored that town. He had been too consumed to notice the extent of her affection. Now the mere thought of returning sent a tremor of anguish through him. He had not visited since her passing. He had vowed never to return. "Not happening," he muttered, shifting the car into gear. "We are not going there." "You have been driving in circles for years," the man stated quietly. "Do you not believe it is time to take an exit?" Thomas's hands froze on the wheel. From the corner of his eye, he saw the highway sign flash past. Exit 57, Bethlehem, Center City. His pulse quickened. A subtle urge, emanating from a deep, dormant part of him, the part that still dared to dream when permitted, whispered, "Turn." He clenched his jaw, pressed the accelerator, and drove past the exit. The instant he did, however, a profound sense of unease washed over him, as if he had ignored a summons intended solely for him. He glanced in the mirror. The man in white was observing him, not with anger nor disappointment, but with a quiet patience. "Why Bethlehem?" Thomas asked, his voice low. "Because it is where things begin again," came the reply. The words settled within him, bringing a warmth akin to the thaw after a harsh frost. Half a mile later, the road curved once more, and another exit sign glowed faintly through the falling snow. Bethlehem Historic District. Thomas slowed the vehicle without conscious volition. His rational mind screamed, "Don't do this!" But his hands, moving with an uncharacteristic steadiness, guided the wheel to the right. The tires emitted a soft hiss as the taxi veered off the highway, descending onto a narrow road lined with snow-dusted pines. The man's eyes closed, as if in silent contemplation. "You chose," he murmured. Thomas offered no response. He could not articulate the reason for his action, whether it stemmed from guilt, nascent faith, or sheer exhaustion. But as the road wound its way toward the distant, shimmering lights of the town, a subtle shift occurred within his chest. The snow was no longer merely falling. It felt as though it were inviting him in. And so, accompanied by the gentle hum of the engine and the soft whisper of the wind, the weary taxi driver veered away from the seemingly endless highway of his regret and turned his course toward Bethlehem. Little did he know that seemingly simple right turn would guide him not to a physical location, but to a profound reckoning. The town of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, lay nestled beneath a tranquil mantle of snow, its rooftops glistening as if dusted with precious silver. Christmas lights twinkled languidly along Main Street, partially obscured by the deepening snowdrifts. The yellow taxi crept through the slumbering town, its tires crunching softly on the ancient cobblestones. Every storefront was shuttered, every window dark, save for one. At the far end of the street stood St. Mary's Church. Its stone edifice was bathed in the soft, golden luminescence of a single lamp positioned above its grand entrance. The chiming of the clock tower at midnight echoed across the hushed expanse of the night, a thrumming rhythm far too vast for a single settlement. Within the confines of his taxi, Tom Walker exhaled a sigh. "You declared this was the place for new beginnings," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "Why here?" Liz inquired, her gaze drifting towards the church's entrance. "This is where your conversations with her ceased. It's over, man." Tom froze. No need to question who "her" referred to. They remained in place for a spell, the only disturbance the steady pulse of the engine. Then, without further comment, Jesus alighted from the vehicle into the falling snow. Tom hesitated, then followed. The frigid air struck him with the force of a forgotten recollection. His boots imprinted dark marks alongside the bare footprints leading up the church's steps. He yearned to voice a protest, to seek answers, but the words became ensnared between his pride and his dread. As they pushed open the heavy oak doors, the hinges groaned like an ancient soul revisiting its past. Inside, the church stood devoid of occupants. No choir, no congregation, merely the subtle dance of candlelight against stained glass. The atmosphere held a faint perfume of pine and wax, tinged with an aroma more ancient, more hallowed. Jesus proceeded slowly towards the altar, his robe rustling softly against the marble floor. He paused before the initial row of benches, turning to face Tom. "You need not offer prayers," he stated gently. "Simply speak. That is of the same consequence as a dusty gaze of 5. Tom shook his head. "Speak to whom? There is no one left to hear." "There is always someone," Jesus replied. "Even if it is merely your own heart striving to be heard. A fellowship, a fellowship, a fellowship with a friend." Tom faltered, his eyes drawn to the crucifix suspended above the altar. The flickering lamplight lent the carved figure an illusion of animation, of breath. Bowing his head, he settled into a pew, elbows resting on his knees, his gaze fixed on the polished floor. For the first time in years, his defenses crumbled. Words spilled forth, raw and unsteady. She was preparing dessert that day, apple pie. I should have been present. I assured her I'd be home before sundown. My voice fractured. I was untruthful for my own selfish gain. It would have been better if 7 blades had beaten others. He clenched his fists. I perpetually hear her voice urging me to return home. Every Yuletide, I drive until the sun appears, solely to evade recollecting its sound. It haunts me. Jesus remained silent, his presence solely that of an attentive listener. I presumed that through diligent labor, I might forget. Perhaps Danielle would cease to harbor animosity. But the more I journeyed, the more the burden followed. I cannot rectify it. I cannot rectify any of it. It matters. The words shattered, a blend of resentment and confession. His shoulders trembled, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to weep. Not a quiet, subdued weeping, but a profound, cathartic release. When he lifted his eyes again, Jesus stood beside him, a hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "She hears you now," he said softly. "Every utterance, and in any successes, it is recorded." Tom swallowed hard, tears still tracing paths down his face. "You mean grace? And rather, do not feign ignorance." Jesus nodded. "And the one with whom she resides, that precious soul in the world we have not yet fully explored." The church seemed to transform, suddenly lighter, as if the very walls had exhaled. Tom's breathing gradually normalized. The persistent ache behind his ribs, a companion of a decade, began to recede. It did not vanish, but loosened, like an aged knot finally yielding. He whispered, "How do I know she has absolved me in my twilight and my dawn?" "You already have," Jesus stated. "Absolution is not something one receives. It is something one permits." And the brightest stars in any sky. Outside, the church bells chimed once more, softer this time, as if marking the conclusion of an unseen event. Tom's gaze drifted towards the altar, and through the colored glass, he perceived the initial blush of dawn bleeding into the sky. It was but a hint, yet it sufficed. He rose, wiped his face, and softly uttered the words he had carried for years, but never voiced aloud. "Thank you, Grace. I am sorry." In getting lost in the rest, a place of self-forgetfulness, the wind through the open door stirred the candles, causing the light to flicker like silent applause. And for the first time since her passing, Tom Walker experienced what he believed to be irrevocably lost: serenity. The candles within St. Mary's Church diminished in intensity, their molten wax forming delicate rivulets across the wooden altar. The tempest outside had subsided into a profound quietude, the kind that invariably follows an outpouring of emotion. Tom Walker occupied the foremost pew, his hands loosely clasped, his eyes reddened yet steady. The burden in his chest, the accumulated guilt and countless sleepless nights, had loosened its grip, akin to a rope finally unbound. For the first time in a decade, he could draw a full breath. He turned slightly towards the figure beside him, prepared to express gratitude for this unexpected solace, but the seat next to him was vacant. Tom blinked, scanning the aisle and the shadowed recesses behind the pews. Nothing. The resonance of his own breathing was his sole companion. A tremor coursed through him. The air still retained a residual warmth, though the source of that comfort had departed. On the bench where Jesus had been moments before lay a small, folded piece of paper, its edges tinged with candle wax. Tom hesitated, then picked it up. The handwriting was precise, deliberate, a single line inscribed upon it. "The light you bestow returns when least expected." Is this a divine decree? He gazed at the words, his hands exhibiting a slight tremor. The ink shimmered faintly in the candlelight, as if penned not by ink, but by introspection. Tom rose and turned back towards the altar, his eyes searching the dim sanctuary for any sign of movement. No movement occurred. Only the gentle flicker of the candles and the distant resonance of midnight bells permeated the atmosphere. He whispered, "Where did you depart?" But his query was absorbed by the prevailing silence. Outside, the snowfall had entirely ceased. The cloud cover had dissipated, revealing a solitary morning star glimmering above the town. Its luminescence streamed through the ornate stained glass windows, piercing the interplay of color and shadow, and settling gently upon Tom's countenance. For a fleeting instant, it felt as though a comforting, familiar, forgiving hand rested there. He did not fully comprehend the sequence of events that had transpired within the church. Perhaps he never would. But the void left behind did not feel empty. Instead, it felt replete. Tom carefully folded the note and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He cast one final glance at the altar, at the dying flames of the candles that still burned valiantly in the chilling air. The wax cracked softly, like a whispered secret. As he stepped out into the night, the wind swept the residual snow from the church steps, scattering it into the darkness. The town of Bethlehem lay in peaceful slumber, enshrouded by a sky adorned with the first hues of dawn. Tom paused at the street's edge, glancing back once more at the church doors. He half expected to see the man in white emerge behind him, a smile as before gracing his features, but only the golden effulgence from within met his gaze. Gentle, unbroken, eternal. And in that profound stillness, he felt it once more. A presence he could not perceive, but could not deny. Jesus Christ had not merely departed the church, he had permeated every illuminated space. The sun was just beginning its ascent over Bethlehem when Tom Walker emerged from St. Doc Mary's. The snowfall had ceased, leaving behind a thin, glittering mantle that crunched beneath his boots. His breath plumed in small clouds, yet the cold no longer felt sharp. Something within him had undergone a transformation. The night had been protracted, but it had not been barren. He walked slowly back towards the taxi, the note still secured within his jacket. "The light you bestow returns when least expected." The words replayed in his mind, an echo from a source far older than paper and ink. The taxi appeared altered in the nascent light. The same rusted roof, the same fractured windshield. Yet somehow it seemed renewed, like a vessel that had conveyed more than mere passengers. Tom slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and inhaled deeply. For the first time in years, he did not hasten to ignite the engine. He simply remained seated, allowing the quietude to envelop him. He reached for the glove compartment, intending to retrieve a napkin, and instead discovered something that had not been there previously. An envelope, aged and tinged with yellow at the edges. His name was inscribed in handwriting he had not encountered in 10 years. Grace Walker. His heart momentarily ceased its rhythm. He was paralyzed. His fingers trembled as he slid the envelope open. Within lay a folded piece of paper, its corners softened by the passage of time. The initial words caused his chest to tighten. "My dearest, if you are reading this, it signifies that Tim has departed. What neither of us could have moved beyond is attainable." Tom's eyes welled up as he continued. "Do not bear what was not yours to carry. You were perpetually attempting to mend things, even those that were not broken. I never held you accountable for that day. I never will. I desire you to live, Tom, to absolve yourself, to cherish our daughter once more. Tell her I am proud of her and of you. Where I am, there is no anguish, only tranquility. You deserve that as well." The final line at the bottom, a solitary postscript. "The world does not end when love ceases. It recommences when you allow it to." The words were tattered and worn. Tom released a shaky breath. He reclined in the seat, clutching the letter to his chest. His tears fell silently, not from sorrow, but from a gentler release. He had no idea how it had arrived, or who had placed it in that glove compartment. Perhaps it had been there all along, awaiting his readiness. Perhaps it transcended logical explanation. Regardless, it was real. The morning sunlight streamed through the windshield, warming his face. He looked up at the sky, the same sky Grace used to observe from their porch, and smiled through his tears. The glove compartment clicked shut with a quiet finality, as if sealing a decade of sorrow within. When Tom finally turned the key, the engine purred to life without resistance. The road ahead shimmered, stretching towards the ascending sun, and for the first time in years, he did not feel as though he was driving away from something. He was driving towards it. The snow transitioned to freezing rain as Tom Walker's taxi entered Boston. The sky overhead was a dull, somber gray, seemingly bearing the weight of all the miles traversed. Slush hissed beneath the tires. The windshield wipers battled the storm in a weary rhythm. The letter from Grace lay folded neatly in his coat pocket, close enough to feel, yet not so faded as to be forgotten. He had been driving for hours, following an address penned in trembling script on a scrap of paper. Danielle's address, his daughter's. 10 years had elapsed since the funeral, 3 years since their last exchange. He had mentally rehearsed 100 possible conversations, but each one dissolved under the drone of the tires. As the cab turned onto a quiet street, lined with modest brick houses, the storm intensified. A glaze of ice coated the windshield, blurring the world into streaks of white and gold. When he finally halted before a small dwelling with its porch light still illuminated, the clock indicated 6:42 p.m. The air outside was sharp enough to sting. Tom remained stationary for a prolonged moment, the engine idling, his heart unsteady. He discerned movement within the house, a silhouette passing by the window, a form that felt like a living memory. Then, he switched off the ignition, stepped into the frigid air, and ascended the icy steps. The knock he delivered was soft, almost tentative. Once, twice, and then the door swung open. Danielle stood there, older, more resilient, yet undeniably his daughter. The same brown eyes as Grace, the same hesitant kindness. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain descended in silvery threads between them, whispering against the gutters. "You appear weary," she stated at length, her voice low. "I am," he conceded. "It's been a long journey. That levered past like 4 on Christmas Eve. It is Reuben." He attempted a smile. "I suppose I didn't wish to miss another one." "Is that work?" she inquired. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in, Dad." And I am thinking that Baron of the Bailable Water. The word Dad resonated more profoundly than any tempest. Inside, the warmth of the small living room was almost overwhelming after the chill. The aroma of coffee, the low hum of a heater, the sound of water dripping from his coat onto the floor. Every detail felt acutely real, profoundly human. Danielle presented him with a mug without meeting his gaze directly. He accepted it as if it were a delicate artifact. For an extended period, silence prevailed between them. Simply two individuals bound by unspoken words, sipping coffee neither could truly taste. Then, quietly, she broke the stillness. "Why did you not return?" His crass and dinner lay. Tom lowered his head, his voice trembling. "Because I did not know how. I feared that if I saw you, you would perceive what I had become. There is wrong to play." Her eyes glistened. "I did not require perfection. Dad, I simply required you." See, and we, that fragmented something within him. The mug quivered in his hand as tears welled in his eyes. "I am sorry, my dear," he whispered, "for missing everything, for not being there when you needed me most." This rejued. He moved first slowly, hesitantly. Then all at once, she stepped forward and embraced him tightly, as if rescuing something from the brink of drowning. And in that small living room, beneath the unceasing rhythm of ice against glass, a father and daughter finally ceased their flight from the same phantom. Outside, the storm began to abate. Inside, the silence finally yielded to peace. By morning, the storm had subsided, leaving the streets of Boston adorned with a thin, crystalline frost. Tom Walker stood by his taxi, a thermos in hand, observing the sunrise fracture the skyline into hues of golden gray. He had not slept. He did not need to. The preceding night had already rewritten something within him, a form of peace he had long believed to be non-existent. Danielle had urged him to remain, but Tom could not. An unresolved matter continued to draw him, a question that refused to be silenced. Who was that man? The one who had known Grace's final words, who had transformed a drive into a revelation. So Tom drove, not for fares this time, but in pursuit of answers. He retraced the same southward route, the same lengthy stretch of I-95 where it all began. The highway was clearer now, yet somehow more solitary, as if the world had exhaled after a miracle it did not understand. At mile marker 94, he decelerated, pulling onto the shoulder. Snow still lay thick at the edge of the asphalt. Undisturbed, he alighted. His boots crunched on the frozen ground. There were no footprints, no indication that anyone had ever stood there. Only the wind and the whispers of the past. He surveyed his surroundings and almost chuckled. What had he anticipated? A celestial halo, a name etched in the snow. But just as he turned to depart, the distant glow of a gas station caught his eye. Inside, a young attendant was restocking shelves. Tom approached, a note of hesitation in his voice. "Hey," he began. "Have you been working here long?" "Or since New Year's," the attendant replied without looking up. "Why, is everything all right? Now the sea and good, may I see?" Tom gestured towards the road. "Have you ever seen someone walking out there late at night? Barefoot, maybe? Wearing white?" "That was lead this time." The attendant's brow furrowed. "That's funny. You're not the first fellow to inquire. A couple of truckers mentioned him a few weeks back. Said there was this man walking on the shoulder like he didn't feel the cold. One of them swore he stopped. Tried to offer him a ride, but the fellow vanished. Same on Mayor's breath caught, vanished. The others lifted in time's a devil. The kid shrugged. Said he blinked and he was gone. Some folks reckon it's a ghost story. Others, I don't know, man. Maybe an angel. Do you believe in that sort of thing? And then we came for the grow. Tom gazed out the window. The morning sun had pierced the haze, casting elongated golden streaks across the desolate road. I didn't, he said quietly. But perhaps I do now. It is that man. Later that day, curiosity led him to a small hospice just outside Tewkesbury, a place Grace had once volunteered. Inside, the corridor carried the scent of antiseptics and lavender. A nun in a gray habit greeted him kindly. "Excuse me," Tom inquired. "Has anyone been here recently?" A man in a white robe as high were absented, and by didness. Her smile remained unwavering. "Yes," she affirmed, as if the question were entirely commonplace. "He visited a few nights ago, sat with the patients, asked for nothing. When he departed, every room smelled of lilies. That is a leading the plaid, and having their runnable down." Tom felt the air thicken in his chest. "Did he tell you his name?" "Levered to God." The nun's eyes softened. "He did not need to. His lad of that Beal Radigil's." Outside, the wind carried the faint toll of a church bell from a distant local. Perhaps Bethlehem. Perhaps heaven. And as Tom stood there, watching the sun melt the last vestiges of snow, he finally ceased questioning the impossibility of it all. Some occurrences, he realized, were not intended for explanation, but merely for observation. Weeks elapsed, and the snow along the highways transformed into slush, then dissipated into dust. Winter began to recede. But something within Tom Walker remained unchanged. He was no longer the same individual who once navigated the nights, attempting to outrun his own reflection. Since Bethlehem, since the note, since that improbable encounter, he had been transformed. Not with ostentatious display, but with subtle, unseen shifts of the heart. The taxi, with its dented fender and squeaky wiper, its dashboard cracked like aged skin, had become something entirely different. What had once felt like a conveyance of doom now resembled a sanctuary. Every fare, every trip, every stranger who entered its interior became part of a larger tapestry. One evening, Tom picked up an elderly woman outside a hospital. She wore a scarf insufficient for the cold and carried a wilted bouquet of carnations. For the initial 10 minutes, she remained silent, merely gazing out the window as the city lights smeared across the glass. When they reached her street, she finally spoke. "My husband used to drive this same route," she said softly. "Every night for 30 years. I thought I had forgotten the sound of it, but it's still there. They asked for in Matterword in the Age just to get her June today." Tom smiled gently. "Some things remain with us longer than we anticipate. It is wanting to the world." She nodded, her eyes moist, and whispered, "Thank you for the silence." "And I." The following night, a young man with trembling hands flagged him down outside a bus terminal. His mother was in the ICU, he stated, unsure if she would survive until morning. Tom drove without asking for details. Upon their arrival, the young man attempted to pay, but Tom shook his head. "Just be there with her. That's sufficient." "See matter inside with Arisen." The young man stared at him, bewildered, grateful, and undone, before rushing inside. Tom remained parked for a considerable duration outside the hospital, headlights dimmed, watching as snow began to fall once more. Each subsequent journey seemed to find him, rather than the other way around. A runaway adolescent, a man recently released from incarceration, a woman escaping an abusive relationship, individuals who sought not counsel or judgment, but simply presence. Tom began to keep small provisions within the cab. A spare coat, a bottle of water, a box of tissues in the glove compartment. His former tendencies, the cynicism, the irascibility, the self-pity, had melted away like ice under the morning sun. His passengers perceived the change as well. Some wept quietly. Others simply sat in serene contemplation. To the majority, he remained merely another driver, one among thousands navigating the roads. But to those in need, he represented something more. A steady hand, a comforting stillness, a reminder that compassion had not become extinct. Every evening before commencing his journey, he would touch the folded letter from Grace and the note inscribed with, "The light you bestow returns when least expected." Then he would whisper the same phrase under his breath, a blend of prayer and pledge. And as the taxi once again merged into the ceaseless flow of headlights and darkness, Tom Walker's cab had quietly transformed into what the world so often overlooks the necessity of, a mobile sanctuary for the soul. Morning dawned over the city with the gentle luminescence of early spring. The world was awakening anew. Puddles mirrored the sky. Buses sighed at street corners. People carried coffee instead of umbrellas. Tom Walker's yellow taxi proceeded through the tranquil streets, its paint dulled, but its purpose radiant. The dashboard clock displayed 7:45 a.m., and the radio emitted a low gospel melody that seemed to evoke a different era. He had no fixed destination. Not any longer. During the nocturnal hours, his vehicle became an extension of the passing illumination. On other occasions, the simple vibration resonating through his hands was enough. Each journey now possessed a solemn quality, an awareness that something profound continued its movement along the blacktop. At a crimson stop, Tom reached into the compartment for documents. Within lay 2 cherished mementos, a correspondence from Grace, and a brief inscription that declared, "The brightness you bestow returns when you least anticipate it." He had ceased questioning their arrival. Belief, he had come to understand. It wasn't about validating reality. It was about conducting oneself as if that reality were already present. That particular dawn, a woman signaled him to halt. She appeared weary, perhaps from an overnight engagement, her outerwear insufficient for the prevailing air currents. She settled into the rear section, clutching a paper vessel containing provisions. "Toward the southern districts," she stated softly. The transit was marked by quietude, a sense of tranquility. Upon stopping, she offered a subtle smile. "How much has been accumulated over this duration?" Tom inclined his head. "Consider it an act of reciprocation," conveyed midway through the signal. She paused, her gaze reflecting in the mirrored surface of the front windshield. "You bear a resemblance to someone," she uttered gently. "Someone who once held faith in the inherent goodness of individuals." "His," he responded with a smile. "Perhaps they still can." He continued on his way. As she disembarked, the portal closed with a soft sound, and Tom observed the vacant space, a small void that had been privy to more disclosures than many a sacred gathering place. The external environment proceeded with its clamor and unrest. Yet within the conveyance, a stillness prevailed, the kind that settles only when in spirit ceases its flight. The thoroughfare unfurled before him, shimmering faintly under the sun's nascent glow. It no longer seemed boundless. It felt accessible, unburdened. As Tom joined the main artery of traffic, he murmured, almost involuntarily, "If that truly was you, my gratitude." Somewhere above, amidst the drone of the wheels, a gentle warmth arose, subtle but distinct, akin to the lingering resonance of a voice that had never truly departed. He required no further confirmation. He had witnessed sufficient. He pressed onward with an even keel, a quietude, carrying within him the wisdom gleaned from one extraordinary winter. You do not need to behold paradise to comprehend its proximity. It occupies the back seat. And as the passenger vehicle vanished into the dawn's embrace, its rear illuminations a crimson hue like two diminutive tapers against the pale expanse, one certainty emerged. Tom Walker had finally arrived at his destination. If this narrative resonated with you, if you have ever experienced that illumination can still find you even on the most shadowed of paths.